So, Berto, every once in a while, I throw the microphone to you and say, hey, it's your episode. You lead it. What do you want to talk about?
All right. So today I want to talk about moving.
Okay.
The psychology of moving.
Like moving to a different house.
Moving places. Yeah. Moving from a house to an apartment, whatever. Moving places in our lives.
Psychology of moving.
Yeah.
Why did you come up with this?
Well, I have moved a lot, especially when I was young. But actually, even in my adult life, in my 20s, I moved every year, every year I would move. And I thought about that, and I thought about, wow, and as a kid, I had dramatic moves, like country to country, multiple times.
Yeah.
And
you went from
times.
Bogota to New York to Bogota to Tacoma.
Yeah, actually, Bogota to Massachusetts, to Bogota to New York, to Bogota to Tacoma.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was, because basically I moved with my parents to Massachusetts when I was like almost two or something. Then they got a divorce. I moved back to Colombia for like a year and a half or something. Then I moved to New York to live with my dad for another year and a half or something. Then I moved back to Colombia to live in Colombia, first without my dad, then with my dad till I was 15. Then I moved to Tacoma to live with my mom.
And then you moved to Seattle.
It was 3 short years. And then I moved to Seattle to go to college. And then every year I was in college, I moved. And then after college, every year I moved until the first time I stopped moving was like in 98. Then I was at one place for 5 years.
Yeah.
But then even then I moved somewhere.
Well, let's talk about it. This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I am your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor.
My name is Humberto Castañeda, and I make vampire-proof bandanas.
So where do you want to begin, Bro?
All right. So first off, how often have you moved?
I think on average in my 50 years, as an adult, I would say every 2 to 4 years. As a kid, I basically lived in the same house until I was 18. From the age of 2 to 18, I lived in the same house. And my parents lived in that house until this year. So they lived in that house for almost 50 years.
And that's the opposite of moving all the time.
Right.
By the way, like when you talk to them, what was that experience like for them of moving after 50 years?
It was weird, but surprisingly not as hard as I thought it would be.
Yeah.
To say goodbye. I know some people will really grieve the loss of their childhood home. But for me, I think it's because I had so many adult years there, and I was just getting so tired of that house with the flooding and all the other problems. I was just like, it just felt, I think that's a part of the psychology of moving that I could go into for me, is I enjoy moving because I like cleaning. Uh-huh. I like organizing.
And it's an excuse / forcing function.
Yeah. Like, in fact, I just recently moved this summer, and I thought what we should do, and I was actually telling Stacy this, that there's spring cleaning, where you really kind of do a deep cleaning, but then there's an even deeper level of cleaning, which is Move cleaning. Move cleaning is a whole other level of cleaning.
Right.
You know what I mean?
The fish come home to roost, as they say.
Yeah. Where you could literally get rid of half the clothes in your closet.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Or half the stuff in your garage goes to Goodwill.
Or a whole storage unit, which I'll talk about.
Right. And, because spring cleaning is great, but like and I was like, Stacy, every year we should do a move
cleaning.
Where we actually, and I was even thinking about like moving all the furniture out of the house and, making decisions, and I don't know. But the point is I like that. And so I thought, what a great opportunity, because my parents were kind of pack rats in a way. And I just saw a lot of stagnation. That's just me. And I was sort of imposing that on my parents, but I think it kind of turned out to be true. And so that's one of the positives of moving, I think, is the ability to say, I'm shedding like a crab. Do crabs shed their
shells?
Yeah, their shells.
Let's say they do.
Okay, some animal that sheds their. It's
like a snake.
You got a brand new set of skin. Everything's brand new now. I think I've always liked that aspect.
Clean.
Of it.
Okay, on tough or bluff. On average, people in the U.S. move around 5 times in their lifetime. Tough or bluff?
I looked up stats about moving. I'm pretty sure that's bluff. It's much higher than that.
Okay, yeah, it's bluff. It's according to this 2007 data, it's about 11.4 or 7 data times.
I remember being surprised by that because in my head, my stereotype of Americans is that they live in the same house a lot longer than that.
Right.
But when I looked up the data, it was like particularly younger people are moving almost every year.
And that's the thing is that I am now fairly stable, but even in my fairly stable, I have moved, I've not been in a place for more than 10 years, let's say.
Yeah.
And when I was in college.
Well, what's the longest you've been in a place?
7 years.
Yeah, I think for
7
me it's
years.
like 7 years. Yeah.
And when I was, like I said, in college and in my 20s, I moved every year.
Yeah. I think that's pretty common.
Crazy.
You know what I mean?
So it's interesting. I was also surprised by that number. But all right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the big moves in my life. And they were for different reasons. It's like when I was little, I'm just moving with my parents. But for my parents, it was a big move. They grew up in Colombia. They were born in Colombia. All our family is in Colombia. But there was this big opportunity going to the U.S. It was like there was more opportunity in terms of jobs. They were both in the medical field. And this was something...
Side note, do you say Colombia because you're trying to be Americanized? Because don't they say Colombia?
Colombia.
Yeah.
It would be the way to say it. Yeah, I guess Colombia... it's a little...
Because sometimes when I say Colombia, people will be, it's not Colombia, it's Colombia.
Yeah, I don't know.
You don't care?
I don't care, and I've gotten used to saying now I can't say it. Saying Colombia
because that's how Americans say it. Yeah. Okay. Anyway,
so they moved because they were both going to practice their field here where there was more opportunity. So they moved to Massachusetts. My dad got into some program for psychiatry in Massachusetts, and I think my mom was studying to become a physical therapist or something like that. Big move. And then they took me with... I'm happy that happened in one way because I learned English as a 2-year-old. And that's why I can speak it fluently because, But unfortunately, they struggled tremendously with each other and they got a horrible, horrible divorce, which resulted in me having to move back by myself. Well, my dad traveled with me, but then I remained in Colombia by myself.
Your mom left you when you were in Massachusetts?
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, for whatever reason in my head, you were always in Bogota.
No. It was this is what made it harder, we were all alone there.
Yeah.
And so it was just my dad and I.
Weren't the police called?
That was a different thing. It was at the same time frame. It's my dad finally found my mom and he found out she was kind of moving away with this other guy. And then he couldn't speak very good. He couldn't speak very good English. And so they called the cops, but then he couldn't explain himself. So anyways, and it was a mess.
Yeah. So was moving a factor in your parents' divorce?
Certainly the stress of that move must have been quite high.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, there was no longer a family structure for the extended family.
Yeah.
So yeah, but honestly, knowing what I know now about the two of them, I don't think that was ever going to work, sadly.
Would it have gone differently if y'all were in Bogota at the time?
I think maybe it would have been worse because maybe I would have grown up in a super toxic environment the whole time.
Like them fighting all the time.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Anyways, I moved back to Colombia. So now...
Well, just side note while you're on that topic is people underestimate the stress of moving. Right. To especially to another city, another country.
Right.
I find that, some people recognize and understand how stressful it's going to be, but I think a lot of people will say, oh my God, there's this job, this perfect job. And yeah, great. Career is important and that's important, but at what cost?
Right. It's very stressful.
And as someone myself who has never moved outside of the Seattle area, for these kinds of reasons, I don't want to give up everything and everyone that I know just for a job. And I actually fought it when I was getting my doctorate. There was a really good chance I was going to have to move for a year for my internship. And I finagled and fought and and got an internship in Seattle, which is unheard of. The listeners out there who are doctorate students in psychology, psychologist doctorate people, it's like you're a physician and you're trying to get your
residency,
your residency in the town that you live, or even in a town that you prefer. It's unheard of, or it's really hard anyway.
Yeah.
And so,
wow.
so I feel like people, because I've seen so many negative effects from people just being like, well, I want this job, so let's go, to kids included, right?
And one of the tough things is in this country, we have, especially in the areas we live in, we live in a bubble. We think, well, why should I move? I have everything I need here, right?
Right.
And, in Colombia, back in that time and today for sure, there's so much of a difference in opportunity. And that's why people are like, oh, those immigrants from the south of the border. And it's like, we have no understanding of what it's like. And I'm not even talking about that because we weren't destitute on the streets being persecuted by armed guerrillas, right?
But your parents weren't in that situation, right?
What?
Your parents weren't in that situation.
No. They weren't in that situation, but they were in the situation where the opportunities for them here were much greater.
Really?
And so that's why
what does that mean? Like more money or?
Not just even being able to get a job in the first place, being able to go to the right school, for example. So
if your dad had stayed in Bogota, psychiatry,
he probably would have been okay. It's just, it's harder, and he didn't come from money, and he didn't have the right connections and all that stuff.
Okay.
In Bogota, a lot more of it had to do with
who you
know. And so, anyway, so I moved back to Colombia for a while, and then I moved to New York with my dad. So now it's another move, right? So I go back to Colombia, then I move back. And this is now at the age where I start remembering the moves. Because the first few moves, I know that it happened, but I don't. But now I do remember moving to New York with my dad and starting at a new school and learning a new environment, right? And then I start getting used to it.
What grade?
I'm 5 years old, so I think I went there for first grade.
Okay.
And then I was in second grade when my dad asked me, we went for Christmas vacation down to Colombia. And I had a great time, and he asked me if I wanted to stay. And I said yes. So I'm happy in New York in many ways. I love the New York City. I love the museums. I love all these things. But I was being sexually molested, number one.
Right.
And of course, I wasn't consciously aware of it, but...
So was she an American girl?
No, she was Colombian living there.
Oh, okay.
Or I don't know if she was born... Anyway, her parents were Colombian.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'm sitting there in a school where there's a bully 2 grades higher than me who's like pushing me down the stairs. It's a dangerous environment, right? And I'm all by myself. And then I come to Colombia for a vacation, and it's these loving grandparents and cousins and a safe house. And ironically, right, like Colombia all of a sudden feels super safe to me. So I decided to stay. But keep in mind, I'm like 6.5, right? So it's a 6.5-year-old making that decision. So now I'm living in Colombia without my dad. Big move.
And your mom.
And no mom, right? So then I'm there for many years till I'm 15. And the year leading up to 15, at 14, my mom now asks me, hey, do you want to move with me? So I'm always being asked by my parents, do you want to move? And at 14, I'm thinking, hell yeah. Because it's now the situation's reversed. I'm looking at Colombia. Colombia's a mess. They're detonating all these bombs. They're kidnapping people. They're shooting people on the streets.
And America is where Airwolf comes from.
And America's where Airwolf comes from. And America... My mom is there, my brother's there, and it's safe. It looks so safe. So
is your point here kind of the narratives or the motivations for moving can really involve very important fundamental needs kinds of issues?
Yes, because as you can see, I went from one place to the other for almost the same reason, safety and all these things. So I moved to the States. Big move, left everything behind. Now here's something else. My mom said, leave everything behind. And at 15, this sounded somehow, unbelievably, sounded reasonable to me. In retrospect, it was completely traumatizing. And now I knew later, years later in therapy, I realized one of the reasons I was always compulsively buying things like clothes and some other stuff, one of the reasons is because I lost everything.
Yeah, why did she say leave everything?
She didn't want you
cluttering up her house?
Yeah, or something simple. no big number of suitcases.
But what did you have?
I had my toys, my books, my memories, my blankie, I had so many things.
Yeah.
Imagine leaving everything you own behind at 15, except for one suitcase with some clothes.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, I didn't realize it at the time, but it definitely traumatized me. Okay, and then I moved to the States, and I'm here. Well, then I had 3 years of peace and quiet. And then I have to move out. And my mom told me, hey, once you graduate from high school, you're out.
Yeah.
Right? So I had to move out to college. And then in college, it was like moving every year. So like for me, it was always, when I was young, it was always like these survival things, right? I have to move because I need to survive.
Yeah.
Then in college, it became more like novelty. So now it's new reasons, right? Because I didn't have to move. I think the first year I was in one of the dorms, I could have stayed there, but then I wanted novelty.
Yeah. Well, so plus the dorms suck.
The dorms suck. So then I moved into an apartment. Ooh, I've never lived in an apartment with a roommate. Oh, cool.
Who's your roommate?
Davian.
Oh, yeah.
And then the next year, we didn't want to re-rent the same apartment. We could rent another apartment.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's funny because when we moved in college, it was much more of a necessity issue, I believe, or trying to move up a little bit.
Well, there was that too. So we found a place with 3 bedrooms and we roomed with this other friend, Carlos. And now we had a 3-bedroom place and it was a little nicer, definitely nicer apartment.
Yeah.
And then guess what? The 4th year, we moved into a house. We rented a whole house, and it was with Shun and Eric and our band.
Where was the house?
Do you know where Scarecrow Video is?
Yeah.
If you keep going north on that Roosevelt, maybe 4 blocks, and then if you went into the neighborhood, our house was right there.
Oh, okay.
It was a great house. We had a huge room downstairs, a basement for jamming.
A lot of college people there.
Oh, yes. So awesome.
Yeah.
So anyways, and then I started working in the workplace. And then every year, for some reason, I would get the itch. Gotta move.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it was always a novelty thing. But I am wondering if it was just a novelty thing or also a feeling of like being scared of settling or something. I don't know, like being...
Well, I find, tell me if it's this, that people who move a lot as kids have a itch to move as adults.
Yeah, I think there was that for sure. And maybe it was this thing of like, if I get too stable somewhere, something's wrong, you know? So anyways, that was like thing. But so the biggest moves in my life were, one, that very first move, which I wasn't aware of because I was too little, but it was where, you know, essentially my story began. 2, moving back to live with my grandparents when I was 6.5. And then 3, moving at 15 to live with my mom. Those were the biggest moves.
Yeah. Well discussed on this podcast.
Yeah. Okay. Now, does moving cause anxiety? What do you know about this, Dr. Honda? Does moving cause anxiety?
Well, yeah. There's a lot of unknowns and people can be traumatized by moving. Also, there's a lot of grief involved. We've known this for a long time. It sounds weird, but moving, even if you are looking forward to moving, there's a huge loss. A loss of familiarity, a loss of the neighborhood, of the corner store or whatever, or just even some sort of visual things like that fireplace you would look at. When we lose those things, we often have a physio-emotional reaction. Sometimes it can be liberating, but it's often underestimated the shift that our body has to go through when we move. You know, we often consider moves to be kind of these practical things, right? Mm-hmm. Like, well, this isn't a better neighborhood, but we evolved to get familiar with our surroundings and to associate safety. You know, like pretty much every time I move, I notice the first night I sleep in my new house or apartment, I'm afraid. I don't feel safe.
Interesting. You don't feel safe
because it doesn't feel like my home yet. It feels like I'm sleeping. I feel like I'm squatting, you know, in somewhere.
I could see that.
And you know, night 2, you know, particularly a weekend, then I fall asleep. I feel safe, even though I'm no more actually safe than I was the first night. You know. Right. It just feels like the first night anyone could walk in and say, "What are you doing here?" You know,
get out of here.
Yeah.
No, it's true. That feels.
But getting back to anxiety, depending on your personality, depending on what's happening, you can have varying degrees of anxiety. Some people have a tremendous amount of anxiety. You know, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot you have to do. There's a lot of things that could go wrong. And if you're prone to that kind of anxiety, it can be significant. You know, I've seen people go through massive amounts of anxiety, you know, to the point of dissociation and PTSD reactivity. So moving is a big deal is my point. And but for some, you know, it's just, it's for easier than others. But what I do find is for everyone, it's a huge emotional shift.
You know, what was so interesting is when I moved at 15, I don't remember ever feeling like it was this huge, scary deal that was anxiety-ridden and traumatizing. And I think it was because it was disguised with something very, very important that kind of trumped everything else, which was I was finally getting reunited with my mom. And yes, I had visited, but this was like, I'm going to live with her.
Finally.
And even though I don't think I was consciously connecting those dots, I think I knew. I was like, oh, and so that's why I traded everything. I'm like, yeah, I'll leave everything behind.
Right.
Because that's the single most important thing. I've been crying since I was 3 about this.
Right.
And then I didn't go back to Colombia for 6 years, which to me now seems monstrous. Like, imagine you move at 15 and you don't see anyone for 6 years.
The people that raised you.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Now, my mom wouldn't let me go.
Why?
Because she was scared that of what was happening in Colombia and that I would stay there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was that a risk?
I mean, Colombia was a scary place. I should have absolutely gone. My mom had made a promise to my dad that I would go every year just like I used to go there. She broke that promise. My dad had no power in the situation.
Is that really the only reasons? Were there selfish reasons why she didn't do it, do you think?
Yeah.
Like she didn't want to pay for it or something?
I don't think it was a money thing too much. I mean, money might have been, but fine, don't do it every year. How about after 3 years?
Yeah.
All right. So, but then it was weird because then I left high school and I went to college. And I actually would have had the money to go sooner than those additional 3 years. But then I was like psychologically blocked from going. I was afraid to go. That was interesting, right? And so finally at 6 years, I got the courage and the money to go. And it was bizarre. It was like coming home and being 21 after I left at 15. It was like,
yeah.
Okay. So the other thing
that must have been really weird, you know, like, cause I've never been through anything like that before because, I grew up mainly in Sammamish, which is like 15 miles from Seattle.
Yeah.
And then I lived in Seattle the rest of my adult life. And so I went home like every 2 weeks, kind of a thing. So there was never a moment where I was like 6 years had passed.
No, impossible to imagine.
I not only, the house you grew up in, but all the people and the country and the language and everything.
It's crazy. So yeah, so I was actually going to say, well, first of all, you already touched on this a little bit, but are there situations where moves can be healthy?
Yeah, 100%. The shedding of that old skin that is tying you down, to feel like you have power, to say, actually, I have to move sometimes is an act of power.
Yeah.
I have the privilege to do this, especially if it's a step up,
Yeah.
And that feeling of self-esteem, moving to a neighborhood that's more conducive to you and your family and to your sense of safety. And, I just think it's a huge, and I think people appreciate this, but, as we're going into this topic, I'm just thinking more and more about how much for a lot of us, our home is a part of us and a part of our mental health and a part of our, like for me, I always want a house that has trees because I grew up, like the house, the house I live in right now, there's a lot of trees.
Tons of trees, yeah.
This is exactly how I grew up. I grew up in a house where you couldn't see any other houses.
So you feel at home.
Yeah. Even though the house I was in was on just a third of an acre, which isn't really that much land. you know, in
but
suburbia.
the tree density was.
But the tree density, yeah. And there was a green belt in the back that wasn't owned by us, but it was owned by other people, but no one really did anything with. And so for me, health is to be amongst trees and that moist Pacific Northwest earth with fallen leaves and the sprinkling rain. And
that all says home to you.
Yeah, it feels like in the mornings I'll be having my breakfast and I just look out the window at the trees. You know, I just that's what I want to do, and it just feels. I don't know what word to put to it. It feels nostalgic in a good way. It feels fresh. It feels cozy.
Right.
You know, because we're really getting into fall right now.
Right.
You know, it's getting colder. It's rainy. It's cloudy. But I feel at home in that kind of place.
Yeah, and to me, like I said, I think that, so I don't know what my life would have turned out to be if I had stayed in New York when I was, you know, there, because I was already in such a disturbing environment, really.
Yeah.
My dad barely had time for me. No, I mean, he was doing the best he could. It's just he was doing his residency as a child psychiatrist in a hospital and like dealing with a 5-year-old.
And they work residents to the bone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was, like I said, usually. I was being sexually abused. I was being bullied at school. I lived in Queens, in Jackson Heights, Queens. It's not exactly a safe area, you know. So anyways, I don't know what would have happened. But then on top of that, there was no family structure. No. So that move was very healthy. And I was very glad that happened. Because even though I had to do without both my mom and my dad for a while, I had a ton of other love.
Your grandparents.
Yeah. All right. And then we talked a little bit about this, moving from your childhood home. When did you move for college, I'm assuming?
18, yeah.
Yeah, at 18. Yeah, and I moved when I was 15 from my original childhood home.
Yeah.
And that was tough in the sense that when I think about it now, that move was so permanent, and that house never was the same again because it just became more dilapidated. And finally they sold it and it got destroyed. We drove by when you were in Bogota, and basically it was a facade.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like when we drove by, it was just this white facade. I mean, there is stuff in it. It's just no longer our house.
They tore down.
And
left up the front?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And they painted it. It doesn't even look the same. And there is something about that is wounding. Like, I can never go back. That feeling, that concept of I can never go back.
Yeah.
Now, there's something also that forces you to grow up and untether, but man.
Well, so does it feel... What does it feel? What emotion do you feel that you can't go back?
Well, it sort of like ties together the realization as a human that A, you literally can't go back in time. B, that also means that people have passed. You're literally not seeing them again. It just, even if you go down to Bogota, they're not there. And then C, you are saying these things, these feelings of comfort and nostalgia. I can't walk into my room and look and be like, it's my room.
Yeah. I think for me, and maybe not enough time has passed, I had so much of that as an adult.
Right.
From the age of 18 until 49, when I went home to my parents' house, I could have all that.
Yeah, you got like a more natural decline.
Right.
For me, it was like, I was ripped off at 15. Then I went a couple times, very infrequently, 6 years later, and then 5 years later. And then that was it. And so, yeah, it feels incomplete. Let's say.
But who knows? Maybe in 10, 15 years, I'll feel similarly about the house.
Okay. And then the other thing is moving to different...
to piggyback on that, I think I can relate to my grandparents' house in Spokane. So that's where my parents came. Because, both sets of grandparents have died. And... their homes I haven't been to in a long time, but I have so many memories of both my white grandparents and my Japanese grandparents' homes. And I would love to just walk through those homes and sit in those chairs and use those faucets, because they were very particular kinds of houses. And they, my mom and my dad, for most of their lives, grew up in it was like the one house. And then, my grandparents lived in those houses for similar, probably like 50 years kind of a thing. So it wasn't just like a random house they lived in. So I kind of feel that way about that, but it's not as intense because it wasn't my house.
Yeah, but totally. Well, for example, Liti's house where you were at, right? At some point that house will go.
Yeah.
And man, that's another one of those places where it's so iconic in my life, and it's such a unique house. Do you remember how it's like?
Yeah.
Even in Bogota, where the structure of it isn't that out of the norm, it is still. There's some things about it that's pretty specific, and I'm like, I have that house so ingrained in my memory. But at least with that one, I can take a 3D tour and visit it. I can't do that with the other one.
Yeah.
Like, okay. Anyways, so the other thing I was going to talk about is I mentioned moving different country. There's the concept of moving from a different country, also a different culture and a different language. And these are all things that people sometimes have to do. In my case, I sort of had the easier path because since when I first moved, I was 2. I got to sort of like pick up the language for free. My parents had a really rough time. My dad in particular had a really rough time. With English, yeah. And he struggled. He also had a bit of reading dyslexia, so he had a really hard time with it. And that it's something I didn't get to experience directly, but I'm wondering if, like, for example, have you dealt with maybe patients that had moved and had problems with the language or the culture?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a kind of not answer your question directly, but there's a cast member on 90 Day Fiancé, Stephanie, who moved from Europe somewhere as a young person with her single mom to the States. And she, if I remember right, talks about how she didn't speak English at all. And they just threw her into a class, like a regular English-speaking classroom at the age of like 7. And she says that and there was no like effective effort to help her learn English. And so she said something like a year, maybe 2 years, she just sat in class not knowing anything that was happening.
Oh my God.
And no one really tried to help her. And she felt completely ostracized. She couldn't communicate with her classmates.
Right.
And I believe, given her personality as an adult, that had a pretty damaging effect, traumatizing effect, of you're not good enough, you can't trust other people.
I wonder if my dad was traumatized in a way by that as well.
Oh.
Among many of the other things that might have traumatized him. Because I picture this. He's in New York City at a very competitive Columbia University, right?
Yeah.
And then goes to this, I think in Maimonides Hospital or something. And he he struggles with the language. So when he speaks, I'm sure many people would probably roll their eyes like, oh, he
particularly back then,
talking,
right?
Right? This is the 70s.
Yeah.
How hard that must have been. How many times he must have had to prove that he knew what he was talking about, even though he could barely explain it.
Yeah.
I wonder what effect that had.
Yeah.
On self-confidence and all that.
And anger.
Yeah. It's crazy. And I also wonder, so that's language. I also wonder culturally, I know that
that's why I wonder, and of course I don't know all the data you have, if your parents had never left Bogota,
what would have happened?
Yeah, if they could have seen their, because I know your parents, they're both lovely people, and they've got their issues.
Yeah.
But it's not impossible, it might be to you, for me to believe that they could have worked things out. They were young, and you just wonder if they hadn't moved and had support and sort of outlets and for or just other things to do besides stew in their own insecurities.
Well, and even actually, because what if they had gotten separated, but it wasn't this disaster in our lives.
Yeah,
and we still have family support systems on both sides.
Yeah.
And my dad goes on his way and she goes on his way, but I'm still close to both of them.
Yeah. And someone's there to talk to your dad of like, dude, I get you're angry, but you got to calm down.
Right.
Like no one was there in New York, right?
Yeah.
And you didn't have the internet, so you couldn't talk to anyone.
No, exactly. So anyways, it's a good question. Yeah. For example, my uncle Gustavo, he divorced from his wife, but they stayed friends
because they were in Bogota.
They were in Manizales, but still, and they're close enough. It's possible, who knows?
Yeah.
Anyways, so the other thing was,
well, let's take a break. When we get back, let's continue. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right, we're back from the break. If a real estate agent were trying to convince the listener right now to become a patron of the podcast, what would that sound like?
I just drove by the nicest little place on a corner. It's got everything you've asked me for. Okay, no, it doesn't have a nearby park. Fair enough. It is only a rambler. It's not 2-story like you want it. It doesn't have a garage. No, there's definitely no pet-friendly environment. But listen, it has the internet, which means you're going to be able to sign in to psychologyinseattle.com and become a patron. And honestly, in this market, that's the only thing you can afford. So let's close today. All right. Never mind. You just got outbid. Full cash offer, 100% over.
Yeah, just so people know. I mean, I think other cities obviously have this problem too, but Seattle, for years now, has been a very tough market for buyers. A house in Seattle that will go for, and the Seattle area will go for, like $400,000 in other places of the country will go in Seattle for like 1.4 million.
Yeah.
It'll list for 1.3, and 99% of the time there's a bidding war that will add on 200, 300, 400 more thousand. Imagine looking at a house, because usually you're looking at the upper end of your limit anyway.
Yeah.
You're like, well, I can afford 1.1.
Right.
And no more than that. And you find a house for just under 1.1. Well, it's pretty much guaranteed that house is going to go for 1.4. Right. So you have to be looking at houses that are listing for 700. Do you know what I mean? Now, other people around the country, particularly around the world, are like, you have homes that are selling for 1.2. These are regular houses.
Well, I don't think it's that long ago when I was like, what? You know of someone that bought a house in Malibu for $1.2 million?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Seattle's tough because so many people are moving here that have a lot of money working at Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Facebook, Costco, Starbucks, and all the ancillary companies that are supporting all the tech industry. And there's only a certain amount of places to live, you know what I mean? And it just drives the prices skyrocketing.
All right. So a couple other aspects and then we can wrap it up. So first of all, what was this like in the past, Kirk? So let me ask you a couple questions. When did humans start moving?
We were nomads back in the day.
Right? So moving was part of the plan.
Yeah.
Which is interesting to think about, right? So the early humans didn't actually not move. They moved.
Yeah.
That's what they did.
Right.
And so, because I think many of us grew up with this notion of, in the old days, you had a house forever.
Yeah.
It's in the generations. And that's true for most of our written history and everything. Except for displacement, war, everything else. So it's actually not true because for most people in the world, actually, it's been not that pretty idyllic story. Right. But when in nomad times, that was just the way it was. You moved around. Yeah. So your home had a very different meaning, right? The home wasn't this rock. The home was this land, this region.
Well, and these people with the shelters
culture,
that we bring with us.
Right.
Yeah.
So I kept thinking about that because we still must possess some of that, some bits of that, right?
Yeah.
And that is probably...
Maybe that's part of the enjoyment of moving.
That's probably part of it, right? Because like when I moved in college, for example, it was with my tribe. It was with like my roommate. I carried one roommate around for 3 moves, And same thing after college. I had the same roommate in 3 moves. And so like I carried my little mini tiny tribe with me. And there is that aspect of it, like, okay, well, my home isn't just my home. It's these other intangibles or these other people and stuff. Also, you were saying like you haven't moved out of Seattle. So it's not just moving from a house, it's moving from an area. Yeah. So you have that kind of nomadic spirit in you, but within a region.
Yeah, it's interesting for me, you know, having lived in Seattle proper now for 32 years, every neighborhood is close to somewhere I lived, especially in North Seattle, but even in South Seattle. And I have so many memories. One thing that I fantasize about doing, which I don't think is possible, is that I would just sort of drive around maybe like 4 blocks at a time, stop and just say, okay, I remember this happened over there. I remember this happened over there. Like everywhere I drive in Seattle, I have just flashes of
things.
Like just one detail, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to, is, you know, Dick's Hamburgers, the one on Holman up here. And I have so many memories going back to college at Dick's, and late night situations, and you know, and driving by there is just like this flood of like, oh, you know, like 5 moments from the past 30 years, you know, pop into my head, and I would really miss that if I didn't live here.
Yeah, so I think there's that. Okay, and then when did humans stop moving?
Agriculture and civilization.
Agriculture, right? Isn't that fascinating that basically because of a technological advancement that, you know, made it technically easier, it's arguable, but technically easier. At the very least, you certainly had...
it was more dependable.
Yeah.
You didn't have to...
had a famine or something, but yeah.
Right. But and arguably, I know this isn't your point, is that you could grow beer.
Well, actually,
you could make beer.
That's a great point.
Because, you know, some, and we'll never know, but they make an argument. It's possible that we only established agriculture because the nomads discovered fermentation, and the only way to make alcohol was to, you know, cultivate crops.
Dude, I've not heard that. That sounds awesome. So you're sitting
But you can see that, right?
I could see it.
You could see, but wait, so to get alcohol...
Well, I was just talking to someone about how advancements in computers happened initially because of video games, right? Yeah. And all the way till now, most of the highest end stuff had happened because of video games.
Oh yeah.
Lately, a lot of it is also crypto mining and stuff, but most of it was video games, and it's similar. It's just for entertainment. Right. So I could totally see that.
Right.
Well, so similarly, and you know, so in addition to the beer, the cotton, like things like cotton or things that eventually were, I guess cotton might have been New World, but textiles were something that also became very valuable too, you know, as well as spices, as we know now. And like, okay, so agriculture starts, and now all of a sudden people have to stay in one place. And then this new thing starts developing where you're like, well, if I'm going to be here for a while, I guess I'll put this here in this corner. And, ooh, I found this on one of my trips. I'll hang on to this, right? Because when you're a nomad, you better not be hanging on to too much.
Right.
That's expensive to move around a whole bunch of stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Now you can just put it in the corner.
Right.
And then this weird psychology starts developing for us, which is I'm attached now not just to the region and the people, but I'm attached to these material possessions.
And this square of land.
Yeah. Fascinating. So then time goes on, and then, you know, Feudal Age. What do you know about the Feudal Age?
Well, you had, you know, feudal leaders of the serfs. Yeah. Everyone had a class role to play.
And do you know, like, I don't know much, so I'm not quizzing you like guys. I just know very, very little.
The dukes and duchesses, the dukes and the barons, they owned everything.
Yeah. Which is fascinating because you are not a landowner. You're a peon. Yeah. You're working the land, and you hope maybe through some stroke of luck, someday someone in your family line might own land.
Yeah.
Because it's also...
You'll be granted by... someone higher up in the hierarchy.
And if you're not born into the right blood, you might not get lucky.
Yeah. No, I don't know if very many serfs aspired to land
probably
ownership.
not.
Yeah.
But so it's a different reality, right?
But
so
then America comes along and it's like,
right.
and it's like land for everyone.
But so home back then,
it's just stealing from the Native Americans.
Right. But if you're a serf, your home isn't this concept of land ownership. But it is where you are, right? I do live in this little hut. I have my family. I do have my small little possessions.
Yeah.
I just don't own any of this land.
Yeah.
And the concept of ownership for these big land barons was bizarre. It was like, I own this whole people and land.
Right.
It's bizarre, right? And so we can see these toxic structures forming around. And so moving all of a sudden becomes to liberating.
Yeah. Well, to add a little bit of apology for the barons, they had a responsibility to the serfs too. Like it wasn't
corporations are people too, my friend.
Well, it was you could have uprisings and or lack of cooperation. It wasn't like there wasn't a power structure, but there were leaders who felt beholden to keeping the people happy through various
just like slave owners felt beholden to. Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
I mean, look, I'm not in their time. They were doing what they were doing.
Yeah.
Now, but it's interesting. If you're a serf,
and we're talking about Europe,
but if you're a serf and you get an opportunity to move away and have a chance at something different, all of a sudden that move sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah.
It's scary because at least you know what you know here. But man, so imagine when like the new world comes around, and you're like, I'm like, I've been in prison here, or I'm destitute. I could just load on that boat and be free.
Yeah, that's why America is so obsessed with freedom.
Freedom.
When we were upset with France, we called them freedom fries, because so many people who came here in the beginning from Europe were seeking religious freedom, freedom from the king, freedom from taxes, and it pervades our culture today.
And so I think we have all these associations historically, culturally, maybe imprinted in us and stuff about moving and being nomads and then not being nomads and being possessive about things and then feeling like it's going to be liberating to move away.
Well, answer me this. Do you think you, Berto, if you could have it your way and it was convenient, would you move every year and then be happiest?
Not anymore. Not anymore. I now have come to appreciate, I'm not saying not moving ever, but I have come to appreciate stability because I didn't have stability when I was young. I lacked so much stability. So now I crave stability, you know? I wanted to end on
Do you feel stable?
I feel way more stable now. Yeah. I feel like I've got a patch of land, a little peach tree I can sit under. I don't really have a peach tree, but all right. I wanted to end on a note that is a little scary.
Okay.
As we are embarking into this world where there is going to be water shortages and climate change.
Yeah.
There are going to be
Don't be pessimistic, Berto.
Mass migrations.
Don't be pessimistic.
I'm being very pessimistic. There's going to be mass migrations. People are going to be forced to move. They're already being forced to move.
Yeah. To be clear, the prevailing science is that around the equator, essentially, it's going to be potentially uninhabitable. And not only for water shortages, but just for sheer heat.
Yeah.
That, you're like, well, people in that region, they're used to the heat. But not what is coming,
Yeah.
They will certainly die in droves and will start emigrating.
Yeah.
Will start moving,
Right. And the reason I bring it up is because if we think we've had a problem with like, oh, the border's it's an emergency at the border. And like, it's going to be so much worse. And actually, it's going to happen inside out as well and inside in. Because, part of what I'm bringing up this is I'm wondering if we're going to end up being somewhat nomadic again. Maybe not full Mad Max, but where really there are patterns to the climate where you literally cannot stay in one place the whole year. Wouldn't that be weird / terrifying, but weird? Imagine if it's that, no, actually you have to go like the birds, like you have to go south for the winter or vice versa.
Like penguins.
Like penguins. Because I've been doing some research in the last few years of where can I live to be safe from climate change? And every area's got a downside. Every place, right? So I'm thinking, I wonder if humans are going to go through a phase where we have to
how's Seattle going to fare?
Well, Seattle is funny because on the one hand, we are definitely in a part of the world where it's not going to get as hot as soon, right? We don't have as extreme weather as many other places. At the same time, the fires are going to eventually encroach more and more. And so I don't know.
But that's not going to like burn Seattle to the ground, right?
I hope not.
And most of our homes are high enough that it'll evade any kind of.
But today's homes are all permanent fixtures. We have these big structures that are fixed. How do you move this house? You can't move this house.
Yeah.
What if we had to eventually develop technologies that are like more Dune-like or something, where it's like they are mobile and we can migrate easily? And
well, we have it today, right? Mobile homes.
Yeah. What if we had to have things that could be aquatic and on land? It's both a scary, but also sort of a fascinating thought of imagine, I don't know, in 100 years that the nature of being human is that, we move around. We adapt and move around. Lots of people did. It was tough times, my grandparents tell me. But
did you see Nomad, the movie?
I don't know. I didn't. Is that what this is about? Or is that about this?
Yeah, it's about these temporary workers.
That was the Oscar-nominated movie. Yeah, I did not see that.
Who move from place to place in the United States to survive.
Yeah.
Because it's holiday season at this Amazon fulfillment center.
Right. So they're already nomads. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a class of people that kind of know each other and help each other. And there's a whole kind of system to survival. And it's an interesting look into it. I will say the movie was very interesting the first 45 minutes. The second 45 minutes, I was just kind of like, is that all that this is?
Really?
It just feels like a documentary at a certain point, not an uninteresting documentary at a certain point.
Well, I'll say that it's going to be hard to remain fully committed to the idea of specific land borders and specific homes that you own when fires take your house every year.
Yeah.
And when an area of what you used to call your pristine borders is no longer inhabitable, or is no longer habitable.
Well, and what is, from what I understand, likely to happen, whole swaths of Canada will become temperate and livable.
And Siberia, apparently.
Right, because Canada, a huge portion of the landmass, because it's a huge country, is so cold or inaccessible that no one lives up there.
So we need to start buying land.
Right. So if global warming happens, as it is already happening, what will feel like Kansas today will be up in north of Calgary kind of thing.
7 billion people crowding in.
Right, with a bunch of people going, let's go up there where it's more like Amazon will probably move its offices. Although I wonder, because Seattle, according to the climate models, it'll get like California or something.
Yeah.
You know what
Seattle,
I mean?
again, I think Seattle is in a better spot than a lot of places, but who knows? Anyways, I didn't want to actually finish in a down note. I wanted to say I've moved a lot in my life. It's been both good, bad, ugly. Some of it has been for the better, and some of it has been very difficult. But I want to send a message out there to anyone that is having to deal with a move, is about to deal with a move, or has dealt with a move, that the place that you live in is only part of who we are. There's so many more dimensions. It's also the people that we associate with, what's our inner monologue, our inner experience, the things we do. These are all things. So as we are dealing with moves, if we can hold on to some of those things, it can help us through it. Because I think that helped me in every one of those moves. And mostly it had to do with the people that loved me and people that gave me affection.
The only thing I'll add is if you are a family and you're moving your kids, and your kids are older than 3, maybe even younger, and you're in the beginning phases of making whether or not you will move or not decision, consider the negative impact on you and the kids. And raising kids is hard. You want to have as many people in your camp as possible. Extended family members are extremely convenient babysitters.
Yeah. And
trustworthy and loving. That you got babysitters, and you got like your mother who loves your own kids. So
my kids love seeing their grandma, for example.
Yeah. Can you not bring
I
up?
know. I'm sorry. I always do this.
It's Berto's constantly talking
about my kids. I know.
About his kids and his his wife.
I know. I'm sorry. It's just because we're in a podcast, and so like, what else are you going to talk about?
But you know what? When it's relevant, and it was relevant. It was relevant just then. The last 10 episodes,
they love their grandma.
Not so much relevant.
Not so much. Okay.
But this one, totally relevant.
All right. I'll allow it.
Because I've seen so many people who move for work or convenience, or maybe even kind of to get away from one parent, and they become so isolated that there's all the stress. What Berto's parents went through. You just got to wonder. And also the trauma that children go through, that you rip them away from all their friends, particularly if they're 6 years old and older.
Yeah.
Their teachers, their neighborhood, their playgrounds, their extended family potentially. And, just consider that, because I think in American culture, we so much value materialism and career and mobility, and and we don't recognize the costs of doing it. I just wish that more people would consider that. Just a couple ending stats, Berto. Percentage of Americans who move every year.
So I think it's like 40%.
40, wow, 10%.
Okay.
Moving rates are on the incline or decline? The last 10 years as opposed to like 40 years ago.
They are on the incline.
Decline.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I thought I was surprised.
Yeah.
Because in my head, people in the 70s and 60s didn't move that much.
And now they're like, let's move.
Right, but back then they moved more often.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah. Average cost of an interstate move in the United States today.
Oh, geez. Oh, my gosh. $25,000.
$4,000.
Okay.
Percentage of millennials between the ages of 25 and 35 are married and living with their spouse.
Married and living with their spouse, millennials is, I'm going to say 25%.
42.
42, wow.
But of course,
millennials is what?
25 to 35.
Okay, 25 to 35.
I think that's what it means. 1963, percentage of people who are 25 to 35 married living with their spouse.
80%.
So, 82, nice. So it's
gone down.
Yeah, half.
By half.
Right. Meaning that a lot of young people today wait to get married, and they also don't necessarily live with their spouse.
Right.
Percentage of millennials that own their own home.
Millennials, 25 to 35, that own their own home. 40%.
Oh, 37.
Okay.
Percentage of baby boomers who owned their own home when they were about the same age.
Oh, when they were the same age?
1981.
Oh, okay. 70%.
56.
Okay.
So that was surprising, because I would have thought 70 or higher.
Yeah.
Because in my head, I'm like,
it's like by the time you're $300 for a house.
Yeah, because baby boomers, that's my parents' age. You would have, by 25, you're definitely married. You probably already have 2 kids.
Yeah.
And I would assume, and the vision we have is the white picket fence and all that stuff. And in my head,
I guess there's a lot of people in this country that are not as well off.
Right. Yeah. Or they're just kind of getting going in their life. So 56%. Because I think that there's a lot of discourse on Reddit about how, hard it is today to own a home, and how jealous they are of the previous generations, where it seems like their perception is that you were basically just handed a job and a house and a car and a life, and everything was fine. And I think that obviously it was easier, but it wasn't easy. You know what I mean?
Right.
Percentage of millennials say they would be willing to take a pay cut to move to their dream location. meaning that they don't live in their dream location.
Yeah.
And they would be willing to take a pay cut.
60%.
80%.
80. Whoa.
Yeah, that's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to imagine what that means. Like, do they just live in shitty towns?
Or is it more like, well, I'll make less, but I'll be in Hawaii.
Right. Yeah.
I also wonder how many people's ideal location is Hawaii.
What would your dream location if you could like move all of your family and everything?
No, I like this area.
Yeah, me too.
Maybe Upper Ontario.
I love LA. New York is fun to visit.
I couldn't live in LA. New York, I have a lot of nostalgia, but I don't know that I'd like to live there.
LA, I find, it's pretty diverse, the different neighborhoods, but I find like, Santa Monica and
I love visiting. I
obviously
love being there as a tourist visiting.
But why wouldn't you want to live there?
I hate traffic. I hate
traffic's bad in Seattle.
I hate the lack of green.
Yeah.
I hate the smog. I hate it.
It's pretty like concrete, like sprawl. Yeah.
But I love going there for fun.
Considering all these factors, why are millennials moving less than previous generations? What do economists say?
Millennials are moving less. Prices are much higher.
Yeah.
Relatively speaking. Also, the jobs are in specific areas, I guess. Or maybe that.
Yeah, that's part of it. They're saying less job market opportunities.
Yeah.
Because, in the past, like my dad moved from Spokane, my parents moved from Spokane to Seattle because of Boeing.
Yeah.
There would be these things like, the steel industry would like, hey, we're hiring 5,000 more people, or Ford opens up a new plant and like, come on, let's move, whereas today it's not so much that way. Busiest moving day in 2018.
Busiest moving day. June 15th.
Ooh, close. June 1st.
Okay.
Why'd you choose 15th?
I don't know. Why would you move on the middle of the month?
Yeah.
That's bizarre.
Second busiest.
No, I'll tell you why I chose June 15th. Because I was thinking like, well, but you got to wait for the kids to end school. Yeah.
But, your leases are up.
Yeah, your lease is up. You got to move.
Top 10 states people are moving to.
Okay, top 10 states? Okay, well, I think Washington's in the top 10.
Nope.
Oh. New York.
Nope.
Oh my God. Okay. Alaska.
Nope.
Florida.
Nope. It's kind of weird. This list is weird to
Colorado. Okay, no. One for real. Texas.
Nope.
No, come on. Get out of here.
Yeah.
Ohio.
Nope. It's Idaho is number 1.
Oh my gosh.
So did you know the Boise thing?
No.
Everyone's moving to Boise.
Why?
I don't know.
What's in Boise?
Nothing. I mean, it's a fine town, but it is. I don't understand why anyone would want to move. But I think what's happening is trendy. I heard that all these people from California
are moving to Boise.
In fact, they have an almost 100% net gain in population in the past like few years or something.
Oh my God.
Yeah, like it's really popular. I think maybe Coeur d'Alene might be also. Anyway, number 2 is Nevada, which is kind of weird to think about, right?
Okay.
Vermont, which I don't understand.
What?
Arizona, which
Arizona I was gonna say. I just spaced on that one.
Which I don't relate to, but
I've heard a lot of people.
Yeah.
In fact, I know people who moved to Arizona.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oregon, which I'm guessing is mainly Portland based.
Okay. See, that one makes more sense to me.
North Carolina, which
I know many people that have moved to North Carolina.
Okay. Tennessee.
Tennessee.
Montana.
Really?
Which I'm guessing is similar to the Idaho thing.
Sky country. Huh?
South Carolina and Alabama.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, But anyway, top 10 states people are moving away from.
Jeez, California?
Yep.
New York?
Yep.
Oh my gosh. Florida?
Nope.
Okay. Not Washington.
Nope.
Okay. Let's see. What else is
No, we definitely have been on the incline over 30 years.
Texas?
Nope.
Okay. I don't know any more states.
Illinois,
Illinois.
New Jersey,
Oh, okay, yeah, New Jersey.
West Virginia,
Massachusetts.
no, Alaska, North Dakota, Connecticut, Kansas, Michigan, California. The busiest moving routes, so state to state,
Oh, wow.
top 5.
Okay, well, since you've told me that they're going to like these places like Montana and stuff, I'm going to go from California up north to the middle of the country.
Nope.
Okay. I don't know, like down the middle of the country is the busiest. North to south.
No, but I'll give you part of the answer. 2 of the states are California and New York. They're moving away from. So
California to Arizona.
Yes.
Oh, okay. New York to Florida.
Yes.
Okay. And
2 more.
what was the other one? It was
Well, it's California and New York. Oh, right.
are the other ones also from California or?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And New York.
Okay, then California to Idaho.
No.
No. California to Nevada.
No.
That one makes it. Come on, that one's got to make sense.
No, it's California. So you said New York to Florida,
Yeah.
and California, Arizona, California to Washington,
Oh, okay. That
which
makes
has been a
sense.
trend for a long
Yeah,
time.
that makes sense.
California to Texas. I think it's a lot of Austin people.
Really?
Yeah.
That was surprising.
And New York to California,
Wow.
which is kind of funny. This is interesting. Percentage between using professional movers usage versus DIY, do it yourself with a rented moving truck, U-Haul, or do it yourself with no assistance at all, just using your own truck or your own car. So what percentage between those 3?
Okay, I'd say do it yourself with your own car is like 30%.
45, close.
And then renting a U-Haul is like, 40%.
33.
And then the remainder is the
Yeah.
hire the movers.
22%.
22. Yeah.
I was kind of surprised by that almost half, they don't even get a moving truck.
Yeah.
They don't even rent a truck.
That's how I used to do it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
But to me, I always thought I was like being super dumb
Stingy
about
or
it.
something?
Yeah, because I would have a Honda Civic.
Yeah.
And I would move everything.
Well,
in
I
that
also
thing.
didn't have that much.
Yeah.
So me and Eric, like we lived in this place and we got another place that was like 2 blocks away. So we just packed our cars repeatedly with stuff.
Yeah. So percentage wise, why did people move? Like they stated a reason why they moved. There's a huge list here.
For work.
I'm sure. Yeah. For job or transfer, 11%.
Oh, 11? That's surprising. I would expect it to be higher. For school, 30%.
School, I think, well, attend college, 3%.
3%? Come on. How can it be? That's
Yeah.
bizarre. Okay. Because it's, I don't know how to phrase this. It's like cheaper living.
Cheaper housing, 8%.
Cheaper housing, 8%. Warmer climate. Climate. Yeah, better climate.
1%.
Okay.
Changing climate.
Changing climate. Politics. 5%.
I don't see that anywhere.
I know recently that's been a whole thing. Like, I'm moving out of California because they tax me too much.
Yeah. The top reason was wanted a new or better home.
Okay.
17%. That sounds like a pretty, that doesn't sound like a real reason. It's like, well, that's obvious.
I want a new home.
12% to establish own household. So maybe moving out.
From rent to own or something?
Oh.
Yeah, that must be.
Or something.
Or from, leaving parents.
Yeah. Job, 11%. Other family reason, 11%. Cheaper housing, 8%. Other housing reasons.
Other family reasons.
Yeah, just like a catch-all. 6% to be closer to work. 6% wanted to own their own home. 5% change in marital status, so divorce or marriage. Leave for college, 3%. Wanted better neighborhood, less crime, 3%. Health reasons, 2%. To look for work, foreclosure, climate, retired, natural disaster, 0.1%. Last question, Berto. This is kind of an interesting question. I was surprised by this. Percentage of people who move for work who ultimately regret their decision.
Oh, interesting. I'm going to go 60%.
Oh, 25. But that was interesting that like 1 in 4 regret moving for work.
That's a lot of people.
I mean, that's a lot of people. Like,
if I told you, hey, there's a new opportunity, blah, 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 just so you know, there's a 1 in 4 chance you're going to regret your decision.
Right.
No one ever tells you this.
Well, I don't think anyone would even think that would happen. Because, you're like, oh my God, that job sounds amazing.
Yeah.
But how many times have I heard from people who like moved to Seattle, because that's usually my experience, and, they hate it.
1 in 4 odds is not great. Like, I mean, sure, you could say, but 3 and 4 don't regret their decision. First of all, I don't know how happy they are, because not regretting is different from they are super happy, right? And second, 1 in 4 chance that my life is not going to be happy.
Right.
Like, I'm going to regret my life choice.
Seems like not a chance you want to take.
No.
Yeah.
Because we're not talking about like, hey, there's a 1 in 4 chance you won't like this movie you're about to see.
Right.
No, you're stuck there.
Right.
I mean, moving back is expensive. It's a big deal. It's,
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm just glad that I've had the privilege. I guess, one, because my parents were so stable, and two, like if it wasn't for me who suggested my parents move, they'd still be in that house, I'm pretty sure, and probably just would have lived there the rest of their lives. So imagine living in the same house for like 60 years or 70 years anyway.
Well, it is interesting that I actually, because someone could have predicted, well, because of all the moving I did, that I would have moved all over the place. I only moved within this region though.
Yeah. True.
So in some ways, I did want to stay put.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. Given your background, you would have thought,
right?
But you also had jobs that were in this area.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's another privilege is having just randomly been living in a place where the job market is one of the best in the world.
That is absolutely true. Although I will say that I definitely made conscious decisions not to move multiple times that I could have. There were job opportunities in Texas that I turned down. There were job opportunities in California that I turned down. There were multiple opportunities where I could have moved, and I was like, nah, I'm fine. Like I was okay staying with what I had,
Why though?
Because I love this area, and I'm close to my mom still, and if I'm not going to be in Colombia, like at least I have that structure, that stability. Yeah. Interesting.
All right. Well, so everyone out there, let us know what you think about this episode. If you don't like it, you can blame Berto because he planned it out. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.